On December 7, 1941, an American naval base located at Pearl Harbor in Honolulu, Hawaii, was bombed by hundreds of Japanese fighter planes. The attack lasted nearly 2 hours and claimed the lives of about 2,000 American soldiers while leaving about 1,000 injured. The bombing destroyed nearly 20 American vessels, a couple hundred airplanes, and left every single battleship damaged or completely destroyed. Roughly 24 hours later, with the approval of Congress, President Roosevelt declared war on Japan. With this declaration, America officially became involved in World War II. Thus, a couple of days later, Japan's allies declared war on the United States as well. 2 months after the United States declared war on Japan, President Roosevelt signed the Executive Order 9066, which made the relocation of all Japanese Americans on the West Coast mandatory. Under this order, nearly 120,000 people were relocated to internment camps.
Following the execution of Executive Order 9066, the U.S. military encouraged the Japanese Americans to voluntarily move to an assembly center set up on the West Coast temporarily until they would be transferred to a permanent internment camp. However, many families refused to go through with the command. Thus, the military forcibly removed families and sent them to the closest assembly center from their homes with the civilian exclusion orders, which banned Japanese Americans from residing in specified areas along the West Coast. The families were given a week to pack whatever they could carry and travel to an assembly center where they would have to check in with an official. Home and store owners had to sell their buildings and furniture for cheap prices in fear that others would take over while they were gone, while other owners asked neighbors to look after their property. They were transported to the different locations on trains and buses that were under military surveillance. There were 15 assembly centers and 2 reception centers by the West Coast and 10 internment camps that were stationed in the inlands of the U.S.
Japanese Americans were forced to live in internment camps even though they didn't do anything wrong. All arrivals had to be vaccinated. Each location had about 30 to 40 residential blocks, and they housed up to 18,000 people. The camps were circled with barbed wire and guards. The camps had schools, post offices, hospitals, dining halls, restrooms, and laundry rooms. Each barrack contained from 4 to 6 one-bedroom apartments, but each were designed to hold one family. Families with up to 8 people would live in the larger unit. But after being discriminated against by the media, the Japanese Americans still pushed forward and tried to make their best out of a negative situation. They created baseball teams and obtained an education and simply just lived with the hand that they were dealt.
Of the more than 120,000 Japanese Americans interned, over half were children. Many children faced emotional trauma not only on their behalf but on the behalf of their families as well. Those interned had a 2.1 greater risk of cardiovascular disease, cardiovascular mortality, and premature death than their non-interned counterpart. The Nisei, who were in their early adolescence and 20s when they were incarcerated, were especially vulnerable to psychological effects of internment as they were developing their American identity as well as their self-image. They dealt with many feelings of humiliation and self-blame as a result. Virtually all of the Nisei avoided discussing their experiences in the internment camps. In addition, many of the Issei, being too old to refresh their careers and businesses, relied heavily on the Nisei. Some Nisei chose to distance themselves from any association with other Japanese Americans and anything related to Japan in order to suppress any negative thoughts and memories linked to their internment. The Nisei were focused on fitting in with American culture. As a result, the Sansei, who were born after the war had ended, being unable to have any dialogue with their parents in regards to the internment camps, also lost their sense of Japanese identity and were pressured to excel in their academics and careers in order to avoid drawing negative attention. Although there were negative effects of internment, the incarcerees showed a vast amount of resilience and strength, and they were able to build strong, lasting connections with one another.
Life after internment camps affected the Japanese Americans severely, and the mark left still lingers today. Many who were put into the internment camps and survived had close to nothing left. Most prominently, they faced impoverishment and prejudice. They lost their homes, businesses, property, and the respect of others. Post-war, the Japanese Americans who were freed dealt with one of two effects: left feeling free or left feeling alienated. Yes, the internment camps of the Japanese Americans stands as an acknowledged injustice, but this event in history shows not even the American Constitution can protect a minority in its right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Though first-generation Japanese Americans received the first-hand effects, their children, grandchildren, and many generations after were impacted as well. Luckily for the Japanese American generations that came after those in the camps, their lives were changed but not destroyed. They were able to gain responsibility and work at rebuilding the Japanese American community. Due to the severe effect in the internment of the Japanese Americans had on later generations, the Civil Liberties Act was established. This act, signed by President Ronald Reagan on August 10, 1988, compensated for more than 100,000 people of Japanese descent who were incarcerated in the internment camps. Legislation paid $20,000 in compensation to each surviving Japanese American victim as a formal apology. The racial discrimination of the Japanese Americans that led to their incarceration similarly relates to the contemporary issues surrounding racial profiling, terrorist threats, and much more. The lessons that can be taught by the Japanese American survivors are beneficial as challenges with terrorism and institutional racism, such as the Black Lives Matter movement, arise. Memories and experiences survivors hold gives them the power and responsibility to speak out.